Every morning began the same for Nicole. At exactly 6:30 a.m. she would grind her favorite espresso beans, the rhythmic hum of the machine filling the small kitchen of her cozy apartment in a quiet town just 50 minutes from Boston. She'd sip the rich, dark coffee while listening to the weather forecast on the radio, her mind already racing through the day's agenda. Then at 7:15 sharp she'd step out into the crisp air, walking the short distance to her office, a modest building that housed the biotech startup she had co-founded 7 years ago. To anyone passing by, Nicole appeared like any other professional woman leading a simple, structured life. But behind her calm exterior was a storm of unspoken truths and invisible burdens. Her work wasn't something easily explained to those who thought office jobs only involved filing papers or answering phones. As the co-founder of a cutting-edge healthcare company, Nicole spent her days navigating complex challenges, pitching investors, managing teams, and overseeing projects worth millions of dollars. Yet, none of this seemed to matter to her family. They dismissed her career as if it were nothing more than data entry. "Oh, Nicole's doing something in biotech," they'd say with a vague wave of their hands as though her accomplishments were too complicated, or perhaps too insignificant, to bother understanding. Nicole often felt like an outsider in her own home. Growing up, she had always been overshadowed by Claire, her older sister by 3 years. Claire was everything Nicole wasn't, or rather, everything their parents wanted her to be. Beautiful, graceful, soft-spoken, and effortlessly charming, Claire was the golden child, the one everyone adored. Family gatherings revolved around her, the glowing praise for her latest achievements, the admiration for her perfect boyfriend, now fiancé, and the endless comparisons between her polished life and Nicole's quieter existence. Nicole tried not to let it bother her. She told herself that being the weird one wasn't so bad. After all, she preferred simplicity over glamour, her laptop over makeup counters, and late-night brainstorming sessions over cocktail parties. But deep down, the weight of her family's indifference gnawed at her. It wasn't just that they didn't understand her, it was that they didn't care to. Their expectations were clear. Nicole existed to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. When the electricity bill needed paying, when the fridge broke down, or when Claire decided to take a break from financial responsibility, Nicole was the one they turned to, not because they loved her but because she was reliable. Reliable enough to stay silent. The breaking point came on a chilly March morning, 2 days before her mother's birthday. Nicole had planned to surprise her parents by flying home early to help prepare for the celebration. She envisioned spending time in the kitchen with her mom, baking her favorite cake, setting up decorations, and maybe even sharing a quiet moment of laughter. For once, she thought, I can be part of something meaningful. But then the phone rang. It was her father. His voice, usually gruff, carried an unfamiliar edge, cold, distant, almost mechanical. "Nicole," he began without preamble, "if possible, don't come home this year." She froze, the espresso cup trembling slightly in her hand. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Claire's bringing her new boyfriend," he continued, his tone sharpening. "He's a CFO. Well-spoken, clearly successful. Your job, well, it's hard to explain. You showing up would just invite comparisons and make things awkward. So it's best you stay." Nicole's chest tightened, each word slicing through her like shards of glass. "Are you saying I embarrass the family? That I shouldn't come home because of what I do?" There was a pause, heavy and suffocating. Then, his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." The line went dead. For a moment, Nicole stood rooted to the spot, the world spinning wildly around her. Her vision blurred, not from tears but from the sheer force of realization crashing over her. This wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. In that single sentence, her father had stripped away every shred of belonging she had clung to. She stumbled back to her chair, the cold ceramic mug still gripped tightly in her hands. The coffee inside had grown lukewarm, its bitterness matching the hollow ache spreading through her chest. Outside, the early spring sunlight filtered softly through the white curtains, casting faint shadows across the room. But no amount of light could warm the icy chill settling within her. As she sat there, staring blankly at the wall, memories flooded back, years of sacrifices made silently, of bills paid without thanks, of nights spent working late while her family slept soundly, oblivious to her struggles. She had convinced herself that if she worked hard enough, stayed invisible enough, they would eventually see her. Love her. Be proud of her. But now she understood the truth. Her father's words echoed in her mind, cruel and final. "Don't call me your father." With trembling fingers, Nicole reached for her laptop and logged into her banking app. For nearly 2 years she had been sending money to her parents every month. Electricity, water, internet, cable. Nearly $16,000 in total. And yet, not once had they said thank you. Not once had they acknowledged her efforts beyond a casual request for more. That night, Nicole canceled all automatic payments. One by one the notifications popped up, auto payment canceled successfully. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. Just like how she had always existed in her family's eyes. As the hours passed, Nicole remained seated in her armchair, the empty coffee cup resting on the table beside her. The apartment was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos raging inside her. For the first time in her life, she realized something painful yet liberating. She was no longer part of the family she had tried so desperately to hold together. And for the first time she wondered if holding on had ever been worth it. The days that followed my father's call were a blur of quiet determination. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't let the anger consume me. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and methodically canceled every automatic payment I had set up for my parents' household expenses. Each click felt like a small act of liberation, a deliberate severing of the invisible chains that had bound me to them for years. Electric bill? Gone. Water? Canceled. Internet and cable? Erased. It wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming myself. For nearly 2 years, I had sent over $16,000 to cover their needs without so much as a thank you. Not once had they asked if I could afford it or expressed gratitude. To them, it was simply expected, as though being their daughter came with an unwritten contract obligating me to clean up their messes. But now that contract was void. My mother's birthday arrived quickly, and I made no effort to acknowledge it. No text, no card, no social media post. It wasn't out of spite but because I couldn't pretend anymore. By mid-morning my phone buzzed incessantly, messages from my mom, then my dad, and finally Claire. Nicole, sweetheart, my mom's first message read, "I think the power's out. Can you check for us? It's an important day." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. Important day? Was this how they saw me, as someone whose sole purpose was to ensure their comfort on special occasions? I placed the phone face down on the table and sipped my cold coffee. 15 minutes later, another message popped up, this time from my dad. Still no power. Water's not running either. Is something wrong with the payments? Call the provider now. Short, cold, commanding. As if I were still their unpaid logistics manager. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. For 2 years I had never missed a single payment. Not one. Electricity, water, internet, cable. I handled them all, month after month, without reminders or delays. And yet here we were. On the very day Claire was introducing her boyfriend to the family, their house was in chaos. No electricity, no water, no internet. Exactly as I had anticipated. By 11 a.m. the floodgates opened. Messages poured in from everyone, my mom pleading, my dad barking orders, and Claire accusing me of selfishness. Seriously, Nicole? Claire wrote. Today is special. Mom's about to cry. There's no internet. I can't call anyone. I'm losing it here. Can you stop being selfish? I leaned back, my coffee long gone cold. Their texts didn't vindicate me. They didn't satisfy me. All I felt was emptiness, a quiet, unwavering emptiness. Then the phone buzzed again. A video call from Aunt Sharon, the only person in the family who still sent holiday messages, even if I rarely responded. I hesitated before answering. Her old kitchen came into view, lit only by the dim glow of a phone flashlight. She looked tired, her eyes slightly red. Nicole, she said softly, your mom's in a panic. The house is dark. Everyone's running around and no one knows what to do. I said nothing, just stared at her. She paused, then added, her tone neither accusing nor defending, what happened? You've never missed your mom's birthday. I know you have your reasons, but say something. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. My dad said I embarrassed the family. Told me if I insisted on coming, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. What do you think I should do after that? Aunt Sharon froze. Her face changed in an instant. In the background I heard noise, my mother saying loudly, she's probably just sulking. No one would be heartless enough to do this. Then a sharper voice, Claire, Liam's almost here. Someone called the power company already. I can't believe she did this to us today. I gave a slight, joyless smile. Aunt Sharon heard everything. She didn't defend anyone, didn't say a word. And then, unexpectedly, the screen shifted. A new face entered the frame, Liam. Same neat suit, same polished expression as in his resume. He stared at the screen and blurted out, almost involuntarily, Nicole? You're Nicole Warren, the one who runs Pacific Genomics. I nodded, my eyes steady. A long pause. Then Liam turned to everyone in the room. She's my direct superior and the one who approved my transfer to Boston. Stunned silence. Claire's jaw dropped. My parents froze. No one said a word. I calmly replied, "Hope your introduction today goes well," then ended the call. Afterward, I set my phone down without another word. Outside the window, the dim afternoon light filtered weakly through thick gray clouds. Everything around me was so quiet it barely felt real. No voices, no follow-up texts, no calls, just me and a strange, weightless sense of relief. The truth had been revealed, not by me but by them. I hadn't needed to expose anyone. I had simply stayed silent and let everything unfold exactly as it was meant to. Liam had confirmed it clearly. I was his superior, the co-founder of Pacific Genomics, the company they assumed I was just some desk worker for. In that moment, my family's kitchen became a stage where the masks fell one by one, and no one could stop it. Claire, the sister who once whispered to Mom that Nicole should pick a job easier to introduce, now stood frozen beside a birthday cake that hadn't even been lit. She had tried so hard to impress her boyfriend with empty compliments and a picture-perfect family. But in the end, it was that very boyfriend who called me boss in front of everyone. I could picture the scene like I was watching a replay. My mother, so flustered she nearly dropped the cake tray. My father, red-faced, gripping the edge of the table. And the relatives, those who only showed up for food and judgment, sitting in stunned silence, eyes darting around as they tried to process what had just happened. That evening I returned to my office. The familiar hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards greeted me. Liam walked in, folder in hand, his face slightly tense. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes widened in shock. "Nicole?" he asked softly. I smiled faintly, calm and composed. "Welcome to Pacific Genomics. I'll be reviewing the entire financial plan for this quarter. I look forward to working with you." Liam froze. His face flushed, then turned pale. No one in my family knew I co-founded this company. No one had ever asked what I really did. They just assumed I was some low-level desk worker. I said nothing more, just slid the contract toward him. Liam took it and quietly left the room. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I just felt like the wheel had finally turned. And this time I didn't have to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. It was a rare Sunday afternoon, one of those moments when I decided to unplug from work. No laptop, no emails, no spreadsheets. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of leaves outside my window. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm, as if life had finally slowed down enough to let me breathe. And then the doorbell rang. I froze, staring at the peephole. My parents stood there, Mom holding a small bag, her face tired and drawn, Dad with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable but still carrying that familiar hardness. I hesitated, letting my mind catch up with what I was seeing. Why were they here? After everything that had happened, after all the silence and accusations, why now? But something inside me told me not to ignore them. I opened the door without a word. No hugs, no warm greetings, just a heavy silence that stretched from the hallway into my living room. I poured water into 2 glasses, set them down on the coffee table and sat across from them. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel their eyes scanning the apartment. Simple, tidy, and completely untouched by any presence of theirs. Dad spoke first, his voice gruff but quieter than usual. "About your mom's birthday?" He paused, glancing at me before continuing. I said some things I shouldn't have. I stayed silent, watching him carefully. He cleared his throat, his tone slower this time, almost hesitant. "Maybe we've been a little hard on you. Claire's been a mess since the breakup and your mom's been crying nonstop. So, we thought we'd sit down and talk, like a family." I nodded slightly, still saying nothing. I wanted to see where this was going. I was used to the long build-up before they got to what they really came for. Mom jumped in, her voice trembling. "Well, we actually have a proposal." She hesitated, then placed the bag on the table and pulled out a printed sheet. "We've thought it through. You're stable now. Your job is great. If possible, we're hoping you could help us with a monthly contribution, around $2,000. Just enough to cover living costs, insurance, and some retirement savings." I looked up at her, my heart sinking. $2,000 a month. It wasn't about the money, it was about the audacity, the sheer gall of asking me again after everything. Dad chimed in as if afraid I'd misunderstand. "It's not much for someone in your position. We're family, Nicole." I sat up straighter, keeping my tone steady. "What about Claire?" Mom hesitated. She's not doing well after the breakup. Work's not going great. We can't pressure her. I let out a soft laugh, not out of bitterness but because it was all so painfully familiar. Claire was always the one who couldn't be pressured and I was always the one who could handle it. I looked directly at them, my voice firm. If Claire agrees to contribute her part, $1000 a month, I'll sign a contract. One that clearly states, when you both pass, all assets including the house will belong to me. Silence filled the room. Dad's face flushed red, his jaw tightening. Are you seriously giving your own parents conditions? I didn't blink. Not conditions. Principles. I already spent nearly $16,000 on this family over 2 years without anyone ever acknowledging it. If you want me to continue, then things need to be clear. Mom turned to Dad, her voice starting to waver. Maybe we should talk it over, but he shot up from his seat, slamming his hand against the wooden table, making the glasses rattle. We raised her for over 20 years and now when we ask for a little help, she demands a contract. Unbelievable. I stayed seated, my eyes locked on him. Dad, I don't owe you. If you think raising me was some kind of investment that needs a return, we can calculate it line by line. But I won't pay for it with silence anymore. His lips pressed tight as if he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Mom stood up, gently tugging at his arm. Let's go. I stood too, walking them to the door. No hugs, no goodbyes. When the door closed behind them, all that remained was the soft breeze drifting in from the balcony. In that stillness, I knew another chapter had ended. And this time I was the one who wrote the final line. I walked to the window, staring out at the night sky. The city lights twinkled faintly, like distant stars trying to break through the darkness. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. For years, I had carried the weight of their expectations, their indifference, their unspoken demands. I had tried to prove myself, to earn their love, to be the daughter they wanted. But now, standing here in the quiet of my apartment, I realized I didn't need to carry that weight anymore. I chose to stand up, not to hurt them but to protect myself. I chose to set boundaries, not because I was selfish, but because I finally understood that self-worth couldn't be defined by someone else's pity or sudden needs. As I gazed out at the horizon, I felt lighter, freer. The invisible strings that had tied me to their expectations were finally severed. And though the road ahead might be uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I had chosen myself. The days that followed my parents' visit felt like shedding an old skin. I had spent so many years carrying their expectations, their silent demands, their unspoken rules about who I should be. But now, for the first time, I chose to live for myself. No more payments sent in silence, no more pretending birthdays and holidays were sacred obligations. If family meant being seen as a whole person, flaws, strengths, and all, then what I had with them wasn't family at all. It was a transaction, one where I gave everything and received nothing but neglect in return. I stopped marking dates on my calendar. Claire's birthday? Gone. Thanksgiving? Irrelevant. Christmas? Just another day. At first, it felt strange, not because I missed them but because I realized how much of my life had been dictated by guilt. Guilt for not being good enough. Guilt for not fitting into their mold. Guilt for wanting something better than the role they had assigned me. But now, without the weight of those invisible chains, I could breathe freely. And then came the email from Liam. It arrived late one evening when I was reviewing quarterly projections. The subject line read, "Apology and goodbye." My heart sank before I even opened it. Nicole, I don't know where to start, but after last night I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking, and what happened probably shouldn't have unfolded in front of so many people. But at the same time, I feel a strange sense of clarity, especially about you. I'm not ashamed that you're Claire's sister. I'm ashamed that I didn't see her true self sooner. I can't stay in a relationship where basic respect doesn't exist. As of today, I'm ending things with Claire. Thank you for staying silent yesterday. And thank you for the way you lead, quiet but strong and fair. Liam. I read it twice, leaning back in my chair. I wasn't happy that Claire got dumped, I just felt, right? Like for the first time, someone outside finally saw what I'd been living with for years. The things I'd been told I was too sensitive about or too cold for staying quiet about. Claire's messages came flooding in less than an hour later. Nicole, I know you're busy, but please can you talk to Liam for me? He's misunderstanding everything. I stared at the screen, calm and unmoved. Then another message popped up 5 minutes later. You're his boss. You have influence. If you say something, he'll reconsider. I stood up and walked over to the window, gazing down at the busy street below. All those years, I had wished for just one message from Claire checking in when I was hurting, one word of encouragement when I failed. But there was nothing. And now that her perfect facade had crumbled, the person she turned to was me, not to apologize but to fix it. I returned to my desk and typed out a response. Liam didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because of who you are. And maybe for the first time he really saw it. Claire didn't reply immediately. But an hour later, another message arrived. You're right. But I really don't want to lose him. I'll change this time. Please, just this once. I didn't respond, not because I was angry but because I was past the point of explaining. Some lessons I realized couldn't be taught, they had to be lived. The next morning, during a company-wide meeting, Liam walked into the conference room with a polished folder in hand. His demeanor was professional, respectful, and focused. As he presented the financial report, I couldn't help but notice how much he had grown since joining Pacific Genomics. There was no trace of the awkwardness from the video call weeks ago, only confidence and maturity. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. I watched silently, feeling a quiet pride, not just for him but for myself. This was the culmination of everything I had fought for. A workplace built on respect, transparency, and hard work. And in that moment I realized how far I had come. After the meeting, I lingered behind, gathering my notes. Liam approached me hesitantly, his expression cautious. Nicole, he began, thank you again. For everything. I smiled faintly. No thanks needed. Everyone chooses their path and you made yours. That takes courage. He nodded, then turned to leave. As the door clicked shut, I gathered my things and stepped out into the hallway. Sunlight poured through the glass panels, casting golden streaks across the floor. Outside, the sky was clear, the air crisp with the promise of spring. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Walking to my car, I replayed the events of the past few months in my mind. The phone call from my father. The chaos of my mother's birthday. The truth revealed, not by me but by circumstances beyond my control. And now, Claire's desperate pleas, Liam's decision to leave her, and the quiet respect we shared in the office. Each moment had been a step toward reclaiming my identity. I no longer waited for apologies or validation. I didn't measure love in monthly payments or sacrifices. Real family, I realized, was where you were accepted as a whole person, not as a wallet, a caretaker, or a fallback plan. That afternoon, I stopped by a familiar cafe and ordered a latte. On the wall hung a wooden sign with carved letters. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice. I sat by the window sipping my drink, watching the world go by. In that moment, I understood something profound. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Love can't be forced through duty, and respect can't be earned through silence. If someone asked me today, do you regret not helping your parents when they needed you? My answer would be simple. I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved more. Because real family, the kind that sees you, respects you, and values you, is worth fighting for. And sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most peace. It was one of those quiet afternoons where time seemed to stretch endlessly, the kind where the world outside felt distant and muted. I sat in my favorite cafe, the one with the wooden sign that read, "Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I ordered a latte, hot, creamy, just the way I liked it, and took a seat by the window watching the late afternoon sun paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The past few months had been a whirlwind, a storm of revelations, confrontations, and decisions that had reshaped my life entirely. And now, sitting here, I found myself reflecting on everything that had brought me to this moment. The phone call from my father, the chaos of my mother's birthday, the truth unveiled before my family, Claire's desperate pleas, Liam's departure. All of it felt like fragments of a mosaic that finally came together to form a complete picture. I thought about how far I'd come. From the girl who once believed she could earn love through sacrifice, to the woman who now sat here, choosing herself for the first time in her life. For years, I had carried the weight of expectations, thinking that if I gave enough, money, time, silence, I would eventually be seen, accepted, loved. But the truth was, no amount of giving could fill the void left by neglect. Love can't be bought or earned, it has to be freely given. As I sipped my coffee, I remembered the words my father had said during our last encounter. We raised her for over 20 years and now when we ask for a little help, she demands a contract. At the time, those words had stung, but now they felt hollow, like echoes of a past I no longer belonged to. What he didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that I wasn't demanding anything. I was simply reclaiming myself. I used to think that setting boundaries meant being selfish, that saying no made me unkind. But now I realize the opposite was true. Protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. If you let people take your kindness for granted, they'll start seeing your sacrifices as obligations and your silence as agreement. And in the end, you'll lose yourself completely. The cafe was warm, filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversations around me. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, and the golden light of the setting sun spilled across the pavement. It was peaceful, almost serene. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, not because I had won some battle but because I had finally stopped fighting against myself. I thought about Claire. She had reached out to me one last time after Liam ended things, her messages growing increasingly frantic. "Nicole, please. I'll do anything. Just tell him I've changed." But I hadn't replied. Some lessons couldn't be taught, they had to be lived. Claire needed to face the consequences of her actions, just as I had faced mine. Maybe someday she would understand that relationships built on lies and manipulation are destined to crumble. And then there was Liam. His email had surprised me not because of its content but because of the clarity it brought. He had seen the truth, not just about me but about Claire and the family she represented. In a way, his decision to leave was a testament to the power of honesty. Even in professional settings, respect couldn't exist without authenticity. As I gazed out the window, I realized something profound. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by acceptance, by seeing someone for who they truly are and valuing them not despite their flaws, but because of them. My parents had never done that for me. They had only ever seen me as a role to fulfill, a caretaker, a provider, a fallback plan. But I wasn't any of those things anymore. I was Nicole Warren, co-founder of Pacific Genomics, a woman who had chosen herself after years of being overlooked. If someone were to ask me today, "Do you regret cutting ties with your family?" my answer would be simple. I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved more. Real family, the kind that sees you, respects you, and values you, is worth fighting for. And sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most peace. I finished my latte and set the cup down, the warmth lingering in my hands. Outside, the sky was ablaze with color, a reminder that even after the darkest storms there is always light. In the end, what I learned wasn't just about family or relationships, it was about self-worth. For so long, I had equated love with sacrifice, thinking that if I gave enough, I would eventually receive it in return. But love doesn't work that way. True love, whether from a partner, a friend, or a family member, can't be forced through duty or obligation. It has to flow freely without strings attached. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's an act of courage. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's an act of self-respect. And learning to say no isn't cold, it's the first step toward finding real peace. As I stood up to leave, I glanced at the wooden sign one last time. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice. For years, I had searched for home in the wrong places, in the approval of others, in the roles I played, in the sacrifices I made. But now I understood, home isn't something you find. It's something you create. And for the first time, I felt like I was building a home within myself. Walking out into the crisp evening air, I felt lighter, freer. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I had chosen myself. And in doing so, I had found the peace I had been searching for all along.